Starlax is on sabbatical, honey. That's really my best Willem Dafoe impersonation. Damn it, man. What's up, guys? It's your boy Chrysalis here, and today we are going to be adding another episode to Chrysalis's Criterions. I'm sorry it's a little later than I had originally planned to do this since time was not on my side. So this more or less is spiritually the conclusion for Paul Thomas Anderson week. But I hope you enjoyed the previous episode about all the different formats for one battle after another anyway. So for this episode of Chrysalis Criterions, as it's kind of a semi-connection with Paul Thomas Anderson's work, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about Johnathan Demme's work, specifically Silence of the Lambs, since it's the only Johnathan Demme I have. And if you're wondering yourself why Johnathan Demme in particular, well, I remember reading that one article about movies that Paul Thomas Anderson considers his favorites, and I think Silence of the Lambs was definitely one of them, if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on that. But more specifically, he just had a lot to say about Johnathan Demme's work. He definitely appeared to have put him as one of his favorite directors of all time, if not his all-time favorite director. But before I get to that, I actually want to show off some new additions to the fold. I'll be quick about this, I promise. So kind of a 2-for-1 here, a couple from Wes Anderson. I just realized that's Benicio del Toro. I actually didn't even look all the way through this this artwork right here. It's really well done. But yeah, so these are 2 new additions to the Wes Anderson Criterion family. They just came out, I think, last week or so. For those that wanted these 2, but they didn't necessarily want the whole Wes Anderson archive box set behemoth that they put out, that I'm still kind of heads or tails on whether I want it or not, since I already have all of Wes Anderson's other movies on Criterion. But yeah, I'm happy to have these in my Wes Anderson collection. Maybe eventually they'll go ahead and put Asteroid City and eventually the Phoenician Scheme in the collection as well, but for now I'm really happy to have both of these, especially Isle of Dogs, since it's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Depending on what day of the week it is, I teeter between Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, but when I think of animated Wes Anderson, I definitely think of Isle of Dogs first. And The French Dispatch, I covered all of Wes Anderson's movies on the channel. I thought this was a really good, interesting, series of vignettes about journalism and everything, and it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't watched it yet. And the 4K remaster of Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. This makes the 4th Akira Kurosawa movie that I have in my collection. I love High and Low quite a bit. If you haven't watched the Spike Lee reimagining of this movie, you definitely should. Even if it's not completely fantastic, it's still great. I don't think it's in theaters anymore, so you'd have to get an Apple TV subscription to watch it, unless they do the unusual and put it out in physical, which they might, because they announced they're putting Coda on physical after so many years. So hopefully we get the same for Killers of the Flower Moon and The Tragedy of Macbeth by Joel Cohen, and of course Highest to Lowest. But in the meantime, you can get a physical copy of High and Low. It's better than Highest to Lowest in my opinion. I think Akira Kurosawa just does a phenomenal job at all of this stage acting. I think much of this film's drama is captured very well in this one room in the first half of the movie, and yeah, it's great. Watch it. Watch High and Low. It's on the Criterion channel, I'm pretty sure. And I think it's also on HBO Max too, randomly. So yeah. And the last one, which oddly enough I'm the most excited for, Flo. Let me make sure I have this guy's name pronounced correctly, but I also don't know Latvian. Gins Zilbaudis is the guy who made Flo, and fantastic animated movie if you haven't watched it yet. This won Best Animated Feature at the Oscars recently. It's just so good. It reminds me a lot of Wall-E in a lot of ways, where there's not a whole lot of dialogue. In Flow, there's no dialogue at all except for like cats meowing and dogs barking and stuff. And it's just this really whimsical, surrealist adventure through a flood, and it's just like it's mentioned in the title, it just flows like from its beginning to its end. So definitely also check out this specific copy of it. It also has like a short film, or at least the film previous to Flow, in here that you can watch as well, which is pretty rad. So yeah, I just thought I'd give you a brief update on my collection in case you guys have any requests on anything in my collection that I should consider covering. Or just say a Criterion that's in the Criterion collection. I'll just tell you no or yes, depending on if I have it or not. But speaking of Criterions that I have in my collection, Silence of the Lambs by Johnathan Demme. So I'm pretty sure everyone should already know Silence of the Lambs. Maybe this is your first time like watching movies and you just happened on this video. Silence of the Lambs is the psychological thriller horror movie about a FBI trainee trying to catch a serial killer with the help of another serial killer by the name of Hannibal Lecter. It's important to note that this movie, while much of the plot centers around Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, and I believe it's Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill, the movie is actually about Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling. It's important to note that around this time, nothing like this was ever thought possible when it comes to having a female protagonist be a detective trying to solve a murder. And as I was reading through like one of the interviews that's in this specific copy, and also some interviews that were featured in the second disc, Johnathan Demme's decision to tackle this specific book from Thomas Harris, he definitely also felt that women have to jump through a lot of hoops more than men, and he definitely found it appropriate to want to do this specific movie. I'm not too familiar with Johnathan Demme's work. I have watched Philadelphia, but apparently Silence of the Lambs is not quite what you would expect from a Johnathan Demme movie around this point of his career. And actually, when they initially had first approached Johnathan Demme with the idea of making this movie, he turned them down at first. And then he actually read the book, and I think he got a good look at the script here and there, and realized that it was the kind of story that he wanted to tell. And shout out to Jodie fucking Foster in this movie, who not just did a fantastic job as Clarice Starling, but also just had to fight to get the role as Clarice Starling, because I think they originally wanted Michelle Pfeiffer, since Johnathan Demme had directed a movie with Michelle Pfeiffer in it previously. To those that for some reason have not watched this movie, watch this movie on whatever format imaginable. And one revelation that I actually came to when I was watching this particular copy of it, I had already watched Silence of the Lambs maybe a good 2 or 3 times. I loved it quite a bit, but after watching this, not just this copy in particular, but just Silence of the Lambs in general after so long, it just feels like it got better over time somehow, like it aged better over time. Hello. And that could also just be because of the fact that my understanding of film and my soiree into movies and just how movies are made and has given me a greater appreciation for just film overall. I think there was probably a lot of things about Silence of the Lambs that I didn't quite pick up on as a teenager, because as much as I loved movies back then, I wasn't like that interested in like who all did what and how they made this happen, and etc, etc, etc. I think one detail I forget to mention in this video is just how very little special effects were used. Maybe for like sound, they kind of snuck a few things here and there. But for example, for the scenes where there's like dead bodies, like the whole autopsy scene, they didn't make like a cadaver. They actually had like an actress star as a dead body when they were like doing that scene. So yeah, like, again, just my appreciation of film kind of just enhanced, like, as I rediscover it and learn much more about it. So, anyway, yeah, back to the video. To the point where I had almost felt like I wasn't even watching the same movie that I watched when I was younger. But as I mentioned before, Jodie Foster is just remarkable in this movie as Clarice Starling. She does a wonderful job at just navigating Johnathan Demme's portrait of this male-dominated field and this script that specifically makes Clarice Starling feel more like a tiny asset than like an invaluable member of the team. And also, of course, you gotta talk about Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Holy fuck. When I was reviewing One Battle After Another, I was talking about Sean Penn's performance as Lockjaw, Stephen J. Lockjaw. And I mentioned that in that video, Sean Penn's performance in One Battle After Another joins the pantheon of performance such as Heath Ledger's The Joker and Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh. I almost said Anton Chigurh as Javier Bardem, but you know, that's just how phenomenal of a job Javier Bardem did. But thinking on it now, I completely neglected to add Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter to that conversation. I mean, you've got to. You absolutely have to, because you cannot talk about phenomenal performances as villains without talking about Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. And with such little screen time here and there throughout the entire film that he has as well, it's just phenomenal what he does, like, here and there. And honestly, I'm not really mad at the idea that they gave Anthony Hopkins so little screen time because, again, this movie's not about him, it's about Clarice. Which is why so much of the cinematography is just centered around Jodie Foster's Clarice Starling throughout the whole film. Like, when you get, like, the close-ups of, like, other characters, it's important that to understand that we are Clarice, like, in that moment, as she's staring down Hannibal Lecter, staring her down. Or just having a conversation with her boss about the movements of Buffalo Bill and what Hannibal Lecter is telling her. But yeah, I don't need to give you a review of this. This is a certified classic. And it's wild that people thought that this was going to, like, flop or whatever. But in hindsight, Anthony Hopkins, not a big name back then, nor was Jodie Foster. Even if Jodie Foster had kind of sort of come up on, I think, an Academy Award win for a previous film. It also came out on Valentine's Day. Like, at what point are you going to take your date on a Valentine's Day date to see something like The Silence of the Lambs? Like, you're probably going to go see the latest romantic comedy or whatever. I actually need to look up what romantic comedy or what all movies came out specifically on Valentine's Day of 1991. I'm actually very interested in that now. But yeah, I don't need to tell you that this movie's fantastic. It speaks for itself. You should have already watched this by now. And if you haven't, go watch it now, immediately. But I am going to give you a overview on, though, is the packaging. It's so cool. Like, look at this. Oh, hang on, let me make sure I get this 50-page booklet out first. Like, dude, come on. But yeah, look at this. This is so neat. This is a Blu-ray copy, so it's 2 discs. The first disc has the movie, and I think there's audio commentary from Demme, and it says there's commentary from Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins and a few other people. One of these days I'm going to eventually shift gears on these videos, and what I'll do is just dedicate an entire day of just exploring literally everything about the movie, including the audio commentary. But that probably won't be until after I move, so we'll see. But yeah, big ass 50-page booklet that's got, what all is in here? Like, oh, that's so cool. Look at that. This is probably one of my favorite packages from Criterion that I have in my collection. Casting credits right here, along with Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill. I do need to go ahead and get into this tangent because it was controversial then, it's probably controversial now. The film was actually condemned and kind of boycotted because of its portrayal of Buffalo Bill as a gay, transgender, what have you individual, when the intention of the film was to present Bill as someone that's psychopathic and not someone that falls on the sexual identity spectrum. And I can see both arguments to it, right? On the one hand, who's anyone to say how Buffalo Bill identifies? But on the other hand, the individual that you're talking about is Buffalo Bill. There is a fine line between being someone that it feels that they were born, or knows, this is a pro-transgender channel by the way, that they were born with the wrong sexual organs and something just didn't come out right because what's in here is not lining up with all this. You get what I mean. But yeah, there's a line between that and removing the skin from people to graft a woman's suit so that way you can just walk around in it and stuff. Like, that's psychopathic behavior. Like, I'm sorry. But I can see how, like, the depiction of something like that can be misconstrued as, oh, this is how all gay and transgender people are. Because Hollywood definitely had for a time, and probably to an extent probably still has at the time, a bad reputation with depicting gays as either victims of murder or victims of sexual assault, or the ones committing the sexual assault. When more often than not, the perpetrators, the predators, are probably some white Republican politician that is in his 60s caught with kiddie porn or some shit. So I kind of just wanted to acknowledge that controversy. As far as how I personally feel, yeah, I can see, again, how Hollywood has had a bad rep for doing these depictions of it. But I also think in terms of with the Silence of the Lambs, just on its own, Buffalo Bill is more so just, again, this psychopathic murderer. And even the film, like, just within the context of the film alone, it's established by Anthony Hopkins' psychoanalysis of Buffalo Bill is that he's not really trans, he's just sick in the head. But again, who's to say if he is or he isn't, yada yada yada. I mean, it's fiction, guys. You could probably still, in a way, like, understand that there's some kind of multi-dimensional layers to the villain that is Buffalo Bill, but ultimately he's supposed to be portrayed as a killer that's just going to continue to skin women alive and turn them into, like, women's suits and stuff. So, like, again, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe I'll do a whole video about it if you guys want me to. But yeah, so the casting credits right here. Sorry for that tangent, but I mean, it did need to be said. An introduction from Jodie Foster here that I found pretty enlightening. As always, a nice, well-done essay from a critic. In this particular instance, it's Amy Taubin, who touches down on the plot and Johnathan Demme's career up until this point. You know, the controversy about Buffalo Bill. It's cool, and there's like artwork, and well, not artwork, just like screenshots or frames or stills from the movie, whatever you want to call them. Look at this fucking guy. Look at him. But yeah, this contains like an essay or some kind of foreword or something from the guy who wrote The Silence of the Lambs, Thomas Harris, about his interaction with this doctor at a prison, and he was interviewing like one other prisoner whose name was Dyke Simmons. There's a point of when he was writing, when he's interviewing, well, I guess just having a conversation with one Dr. Salazar about like just how it is he approached talking to Simmons, and he's kind of just, you know, critiquing him and everything. And when he's leaving the prison, one of the guards is like, "You don't know who that is? That's Dr. Salazar. He's a murderer, hombre." That's a horrible interpretation of how I imagine that individual to sound, but you know. But he does say hombre in here, so yeah. There's also, like, as I mentioned, an interview with Johnathan Demme by Gavin Smith. Really cool to get his thoughts on the movie. So much care got put into this packaging. If you're collecting Criterions and you don't have this, you need it. You definitely do. So again, disc 1 has the movie and director's commentary and all that jazz with it. There's deleted scenes, of course, and there's actually honest to God bloopers in this, which I thought was cool. And one of the deleted scenes was, there's this one minor moment in the movie where Clarice is trying to get more information out of Hannibal Lecter, and she comes to find that the dean, or like the guy running the criminally insane asylum, put a TV with some kind of late night gospel preaching or something that was muted, and Hannibal Lecter is telling Clarice, like, once you walk away, they're gonna put that TV on max volume and I'm going to be tortured further. But yeah, the deleted scene has, like, when they were recording, whichever actor it was that was going on and on and on about child molesters and everything, and how if they're a child molester, they are going to go to hell, and if you're someone that's not calling that out, then you have a call to do that. And for some reason, all of that got left out in the whole movie, and I just thought that was fascinating to watch. This one also has a little thing, a little snippet from a journalist about pop culture's obsession with serial killers that kind of came up in the 90s or whatever, which I thought was cool. Disc 2 has, like, a lot of the meat and potatoes about how the movie got made. It features interviews from Johnathan Demme and Jodie Foster. There's a documentary that features interviews from a bunch of other people, like Jodie Foster, like Johnathan Demme here and there. Small little interview from Gene Hackman, because Gene Hackman was actually originally supposed to direct the movie, and it was supposed to be his first movie, his directorial debut, but he looked at the script and said it was too violent, and yeah, he just didn't want to do it. Yeah, just lots of interviews from everyone that made this movie possible, and it was actually kind of wild watching the documentary because it sounded like they had a lot of fun making it, which is wild and kind of morbid to think about. There's actually also this standalone little interview with Howard Shore about how he made the music of the film possible. And maybe it's because I'm originally someone that comes from just music. Like, I grew up doing music, and I started this YouTube channel doing musical critiques and everything. But I'm always fascinated to get a composer's, like, point of view on the making of the score and just their involvement with the movie. If anything, I think doing this series and watching all these different Criterions, I'm always fascinated in the different points of view in how the movie got made, from the director, the actors, the cinematographer, the sound guy, the composer, the editor, the production designer. It's just so cool. But yeah, there's also storyboards for the movie. I always keep forgetting that's something they do before making movies. I thought that was just exclusive, like a thing they do with animated films and cartoons and stuff, but nope, they do it for live action movies as well, which makes a lot of sense. There used to be this little show, think back on like NBC or something, called Page to Screen, where they did a special on Silence of the Lambs that was cool to watch. And there was also like a series of interviews from people that used to work with the FBI about their perspective on the making of this movie, and yeah, it's really cool. There's a lot in this, and if you don't have this, if you're like a diehard Silence of the Lambs guy and you for some reason don't have this in your collection, you need to get on it, like ASAP. There's just so much in this, like an exorbitant amount of stuff in this, almost too much stuff in this. It makes me wonder what they're gonna do for the 4K, if they ever decide to do a 4K. I don't think they will. Cross my fingers though. But yeah, overall, like, again, it's Silence of the Lambs. What can I say about this movie? Revisiting Silence of the Lambs, I will say that it's fantastic. It's just so well done, and it's wild what they were able to do with just $20 million in 1991 USDs. And it just makes so much sense that it's like as influential as it is today, and it's not at all overrated. If you have not watched this in a while, like I have, I definitely recommend watching this now because I don't know how, but maybe it's just because of how well it was made. The Silence of the Lambs that I remember watching as a teenager, when I watched this, it definitely did not feel the same when I watched it back then. Like, my perspective on this film just shot up exponentially after I rewatched it. Like, if I ever did a list of like what all my favorite movies are ever made, this probably jumped up like 100 places from where I originally had it. But yeah, if you've watched Silence of the Lambs, if you have this particular copy, what do you think of it? Do you love Silence of the Lambs? Hate it? And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. And while you're there, hit like and subscribe. And ring the bell if you want notifications on when my next video will be uploaded, which I'm not sure when that'll be. I know my next Criterion is going to be Kronos by Guillermo del Toro, so prepare for that. It's your boy Chrysalis here, signing off.